consciously written it.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I'll call this meeting to order at 1:03 on Thursday, February 23rd. Council would like to acknowledge the Ucluelet on whose traditional territories the District of Ucluelet operates. Audience members and delegates are advised that this proceeding is being video recorded and broadcast on YouTube and Zoom, which may store data on foreign servers. Are there any late items? Seeing none, could I have approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Councillor Hoare, Councillor Mafty, any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? And carried. We have one report this afternoon, 4.1, the 2023 to 2027 Draft 5-Year Financial Plan. Welcome, Ms. Monteith.
Thank you, through the mayor. If we can get the slideshow happening. And we'll just advance to the next slide, please.
There we go.
Okay. So today we're in our third budget meeting with our official public input period beginning on Monday. Oh, missing the slideshow. Hang on.
It's coming back.
There we go. So yeah, we're on the third bubble in red. So today's February 23rd. We're having our third budget meeting with our official public engagement period beginning on Monday, even though we've of course been gathering feedback along the way. We've also selected a date for an in-person open house, which is Tuesday, March the 7th here at the UCC. The time is to be determined very shortly, and we'll get Samantha McCullough to take care of all the advertising for that and get the word out. So we're kind of excited about having an in-person open house again. I haven't had one for quite some time because of the pandemic. And of course on Monday the slides will go up on the website as well. We just wanted to give ourselves a few days in case we have any changes to make after today's meeting, and then we'd have some time to make the changes over the weekend and then put the amendments on our website. I'm also hearing through the grapevine that perhaps the ACRD might want to join us for our open house, so I'll follow up with them as well and see if they want to come out and meet with us. Next slide. So it's kind of hard to know with a $19 million budget how to condense it into a nice slide format. So in December, we had all the department heads focus on the operational budgets and discuss some of the non-capital projects. And they showed a 5-year summary slide. And then in January, we talked about all of our capital projects. And we also talked about how we refined the budget along the way. So today we're giving everything sort of one last look. So I don't think you're seeing anything new today. Most of the slides will be quite familiar to you. They might have revised numbers in them based on some of the changes that we've made. And then at the end, we're going to talk about property taxes, which is really what everybody wants to know at this point. The managers all know their budgets very well, so if you have any questions along the way or need some clarification, we're all here to assist with that. So, some of the challenges that we had, we know that in BC, the inflation 2022 rate is 6.9%. It was 6.8 in Canada, but BC was 6.9. Also, they have what's called a construction inflation index, and that rose by 12.5% in 2022. Continued increased costs, continued supply changes, although some of that is getting better. We've got some community growth, increased service level expectations, and trying to balance those levels with the capacity that we have. Looking at our future debt servicing, specifically for the water treatment project, and how to go about dedicating contributions to reserve funds. So I think we can just go right into the department overviews. So what I've done here is created a 5-year slide for each department so that you could see the core services and special projects that are non-capital related on these slides. And so all 5 years for each department is on one easy slide. So there's not necessarily as much detail as there was in December. There were some changes in the planning department. I need to see, sorry, the screen. Sorry, I just need to see the next slide to see what it looks like. Okay. So this is the 5-year summary for the revenue. So the revenues only went up from last time in December. It went up $5,000. So we took another look at our development fees and just increased those a little bit. We've also added in revenue coming in from the Affordable Housing Reserve now that we're applying for the CMHC grant out of the Affordable Housing Fund. If you can go to the next slide. The expenses I've highlighted on the left column in 2023. The bylaw enforcement section is in yellow. That's because that was a major change in that we took the second bylaw officer out when we refined that budget. So I tried to highlight if it was a major change, I tried to put it in yellow so that it was a little more easy to see. And then we've left our special planning projects slides in here as well. So again, in yellow, we've added the CMHC Rapid Housing Project with $25,000 from the Affordable Housing Reserve. And the 2 OCP projects, we've pushed out a year. They were in 2024, now they're in 2025. And as well in 2027, we have that land use demand update of 40,000, which last time it was shared amongst the ACRD and Tofino, and we'll likely be doing the same again. So do you have any, I guess if you just want to jump in with questions along the way, but this would be it for planning for operations and special projects. And then we would move on to the next department. So I'll just carry on unless I hear otherwise. Next slide, please. So this is the sewer proposed 5-year budget. I don't believe it changed since December. We didn't make any changes in water and sewer, except for tiny little inflation increases. So there's nothing really new to report here on the revenue side. We will be reviewing all of the sewer fees this year. If you can go to the next, there is only one slide for sewer. Just head back for a second there. The one thing that I would point out is if you look at the core revenue versus the core expenses, you can see that we're barely covering our costs in this particular program, which is why we need to take a good hard look at the sewer user fees that we're charging, because it's not allowing us to build up the sewer reserve fund at all. So, sure. I can click. Now I have to learn how to click other way. Oh, there we go. Okay. I feel weird without my laptop. So, okay. So in water, water's a little bit better. We've got our increase in sales of services based on a bylaw that we have in place that water user fees increase 4.5% each year until 2025, and then we'll need a new bylaw. We have our expenditures in there haven't changed that much since December, if at all. And then we just have our carry forward projects in 2023, which is just putting aside that money for what we refer to as Signature Circle in case that comes ahead. It's sitting in reserves. And then our special projects, or we refer to them as special projects, is mainly our reservoir cleaning. So we're doing one of the reservoirs every year, and then in 2025 we'll do both. And then there's some money in 2025 for pigging the main line as well. And those kinds of things are all funded by the Water Reserve Fund. Okay, keep going. All right. Smallcraft Harbor didn't change at all. It's completely self-funded. So at the bottom of each of the years, I've shown that there's a surplus at the bottom. So in 2023, there's an expected surplus of $53,950, and we would automatically at year end put that into the Smallcraft Harbor Reserve Fund and so forth once year end is complete. And we just have a few small things on this slide. So we're going to finish cleaning the fish cleaning station upgrade is within the operational budget, as well as doing some repairs at 52 steps. And Ms. Fortune talked about those in December as well. So, but some repairs to some of the stairs and hiring an arborist and things like that. So those are all within the operational budget in 2023. Parks and Cemetery 5-year financial plan. We've got in Parks Administration, I've got that amount highlighted. That's to indicate that I did make the changes. We took the six-month seasonal position and pared it down to 3 months and knocked back 3 weeks of the casual as well. So there was a decrease in that particular line item. And I think everything else only had minor adjustments where we could find cost savings. So again, what we did with these 5-year plans is the managers and myself, we went back and looked at the last 5 years for every single line item and looked at some of the spending trends and if there was room to decrease some line items and where we had to increase others. Those are the kinds of adjustments that we made. And we don't have any special projects that are non-capital related, generally speaking, in parks and cemetery, because they tend to be capital items.
Just a small question, probably to the Director of Parks and Rec. Just curious why the expenditures for parks and open spaces is down in 2024 from 2023 and then back up in 2025. Is it equipment?
Through the mayor, it's equipment. We're looking at some electrical equipment, and I believe, if I'm correct, Ms. Monteith, I believe it is equipment in that differences, and then just trying to space it out throughout the years.
It just seemed odd to me that it was up, then down, then up again. That's all.
Finance and Corporate Services. There's a couple of slides for this because the council slide is after this one, but Finance and Corporate Services also includes information technology as well. So we have some increases to our interest, as we talked about last time. We're getting better interest rates on all of our investments, so we've increased that. I also highlighted the Small Communities Grant. It's gone down. I put it back down to $351,000. We received in 2022, I think it was 441. Yeah, over 400,000 this year. But it turns out that was a one-time top-up. A lot of the municipalities thought it was the new funding calculation based on the revised census data for population. But we've received a response now that it's most likely going to stay the same. So I just did that adjustment down. If we get more, that's great, but it doesn't sound like that's going to be the plan. Yeah, we also highlighted the special projects section. So it's $35,000, and that is for the website rebuilt. And then on the right side, you can see that we pushed out that records management consultant project to 2027 as a placeholder out there if there's room for that in the future. So those are the major changes on that page. And then our council slide, the top one, I just did a minor adjustment to match what the CPI was for BC because that's what the council policy states. And then we increased the conference meeting and training budget for council in 2023. Again, that happened, I think, at the last meeting because there's it's a new term, new council, so there's lots of training opportunities to take advantage of. So we made those adjustments. And we also had eliminated, for now anyway, the economic development line. It used to be 25,000, but we're finding that we're not really, there doesn't seem to be a plan for economic development. So we highlight that for you if you want to have a conversation about it, what economic development might look like, what we would actually be spending it on. Maybe we table it for a year and talk about it next year or through your strategic planning sessions. That was just something that we pulled out for now, unless you have anything you'd like to ask. Yeah.
Quick question. I think we had it allocated for the Chamber of Commerce last year through economic development, but we haven't heard from the Chamber. Their AGM's tonight, which I'm going to attend, but they didn't come to us with an ask this year. I think they missed the deadline, so
Right.
I'll find out more tonight.
Yeah, and that motion that we had before, where we were contributing to the chamber and to TU, all those motions have expired now. So with no asks coming forward, that's why we decided to take it out for now. Great. And then just a couple little updates. We talked last meeting that we would fund the website rebuild out of the leftover COVID restart grant funds instead of using tax dollars for that. And just the records management consultant we moved out to 2027. And the other updates are being done in-house. We have the several bylaw and policy updates and working on our 20-year capital plan. Those are being done in-house. So there's just no extra money for that. It's just staff time. And there's our 5-year summary for corporate and council, infotech, and finance operations. You can also see that we have our MRDT on there as well. So they anticipate that we're receiving $484,000 a year, paying $384,000 directly to Ucluelet Tourism, and then $100,000 goes straight into our Affordable Housing Reserve Fund. So until we get an update from TU, that number can just remain the same because it's essentially an in and an out. Okay. All right. Public Works. It's broken into several different areas of Public Works. There were some very minor adjustments within the operations plan. Nothing really so much so that needed to be highlighted in yellow. The new project you see in 2023 at the bottom, that $74,000, that's all RMI money. We're pairing it up with another $6,000 from RMI, so that's our Winter Lights beautification project. It's going to look pretty. Fire and Emergency Services 5-year plan. We've increased the revenues a little bit. Again, not enough to maybe highlight in yellow, but we have a formula with the ACRD based on the assessed values of our community and theirs. So there's a little bit of an increase across the board. And then we have $9,400 left in a grant, the Fire Smart grant that we're finishing that project on. So that's carried over to this year from last year. The new project is on the next slide. Yeah, the new project is the fire service review. And there you see the Fire Smart grant leftover at the top. And we're also doing some regional emergency operations training, but it's led by the ACRD, so there's no cost to us. It's all funded by grants as well.
Can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
No further information on our grant for a new fire hall?
We haven't heard anything yet. We were told to get a hold of them back in the middle of February, so the fire chief promptly called on the 16th of February, I think. It seems like a lot of grants are currently being announced, so I would anticipate, hopefully before the end of March when they make some decisions. I'm also hearing there might be a new, maybe a small grant opportunity that we could piggyback on with it through emergency services through the province. So we're gonna wait and see what happens. So not yet.
Thank you.
Yeah. Recreation. Not a lot of change here, and other than I've updated the RMI column so these are the RMI is to offset the operational costs. So not all RMI expenses are capital projects. Some of them are things that we're doing that are within operations. So the $157,000 this year is what we're using to support things like the Edge to Edge and the Wellfest and Yuki Days, thank you, and a variety of other operational and fun events in town. And then our sales of services sales of services depends on what programs we're running, so they tend to offset each other. You do see a little bit of a variance there. It's increased in 23 and 24, but that's because we're saying, that we're holding these large events, whereas in 2025, we kind of take a pause because our RDS runs out at the end of 2024, so we don't know if we're receiving or what we're receiving for RMI funds in 2025. So perhaps this time next year, we'll be able to fill out the rest of the years moving forward. Uh-oh. Now what have I done? Sorry. Oh, look at that.
Could I ask you a quick question?
Absolutely.
If we go back a couple of pages to the fire and emergency,
Sure.
it's in 2023 177 to 237 for 2024.
Yep.
Is that that's a extra?
Yep, that's the deputy chief position that we would have start in July of this year.
Okay.
Yep.
Have we got that one? When do we put that one out? That ad. Just curious.
Well,
Still trying to move my brother out to the West Coast.
oh, that would be lovely. No, it's okay. So later on, Mr. Lawrence is actually going to represent the future staffing slide, but in the partial answer to that is there's a few positions that were adopted in the plan by previous council. But again, we just kind of want to get past today to make sure there's no major changes that you want us to make. Some of these positions we do want to move forward and get the advertising out, but we're kind of just waiting for today. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank
Great.
you.
Okay. Where were we? Did I talk about the expenses in recreation yet? No? Okay. Yes, I did. Did I? No, I didn't. Okay.
No.
All right. So this is our, I know it's a short train, expenses slide. So again, it depends what events we have on the go. It kind of fluctuates a little bit. We did pare back a little bit on our fleet because as we're replacing vehicles with new trucks, we don't have as many repairs to do. So we were able to cut back on some of that. You do see less expenses in 2025, again, because we don't know exactly the magnitude of the events that we would be putting on. And I'm just going to pop to the next slide and we can talk about the carry forward and the new projects down there. So the carry forward projects we're going to be doing some painting again on the south side of this building and getting the junction sign, wayfinding, and the rest of the bilingual road signage done as well. The painting we have in reserves. We've already collected taxes for that this year. We just need to do that particular job out of reserves now. I think it's being done in the spring. Yep, getting the nod. Yep, and then the rest of it is being financed by RMI. And then we've highlighted some new projects. I think we've talked about them verbally, but I didn't have them on this slide before. So our recreation master plan, it's actually Parks and Recreation master plan. It's going to come out of the Parks and Recreation Reserve Fund instead of taxes. And then a couple of the multi-year projects that are both funded through RMI as well, the Tourism Matrix and the First Nations tourism projects and planning that we're doing. I'm not sure, Ms. Fortune, if Council has heard in detail about the multi-year projects or not, or maybe you could speak to them.
So there we go. Thank you. Through the mayor. Yeah, our multi-year projects, the tourism metrics is ways we're working with potentially some companies as well as Tofino, and kind of looking at a regional look at how we measure tourism on the West Coast. So that will be a multi-year project, and that is funded through RMI. It also helps a lot with our grants, especially the tourism grants, as well as it supports some planning issues where we see where housing comes into play, as well as it certainly supports tourism Ucluelet. So that will be a joint project. So we'll be just one of the people to the table at that one. The First Nations Tourism Project is something myself and Mr. Lawrence will be building out and working with Ucluelet and our regional area. And so more to come on that. We don't have all the details. It's going to be a very interesting project as we work through that for the next couple of years. Dwayne, have I captured that? Yeah. And then the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, we hope to be rolling that out relatively soon.
When was the last Parks and Recreation Master Plan was done?
I can tell you exactly. It was as we were unfortunately building this building, so the timing was a little off. So our last Parks and Recreation Master Plan actual rollout was 2012. So it's time.
Great, thank you, Ms. Fortune. Next slide, I think, is going to be Mr. Lawrence. Oh, I have the controller. Okay, sorry. There we go, Mr. Lawrence.
All right, thank you, Ms. Monteith. So as council will recall, we had three positions that were considered by the previous council that are moving forward into the 5-year plan. So public works, admin, labor. We're doing a temporary position right now to add some needed support for our director of operations and engineering, but we're looking at labor or the administrative capacity there. So the positions are funded similarly out of the same pot. They're at the same level, but we know that there's needed support. It's just where is it going to be most effective? So it's coming. It's desperately needed. It's just a matter of defining where that large support is. Right now, we're in a position where we are still missing the manager position, which is skewing some of the need and demand on the administrative side. Although our original plan was for a labor, we were thinking about a temporary admin support position. Then we have the manager position being filled. We're hoping to go out to fill that in the next month or two, or at least advertise for it. And then once that position is filled, we'll be able to determine, is that position best filled to provide the needed support for our parks, our public works and operations as administrative or as labor position within that department. So it's a little in flux. We know there's a desperate need for that additional support, but that manager position is really throwing a wrench into how it looks right now. So Mr. McIntosh, myself, and the operations team are really looking into that and trying to determine where the best fit for that position is. The parks labor, looking at 2025, splitting it over 26, and then the deputy fire chief. Council will notice that we've split these all starting in July, and they move over into the next year. The reason for that is the budget process doesn't get really approved until later in the year, and we want to make sure that the budget is fulfilling council's objectives before we post for those positions, and then that spreads that load out of the position, half of it funded in the second half of the approved year, and then carries into the next year. So that's why you sort of see it starting in July, and also trying to fill a position January 1st never works. So that's another reason why we just push it out to where it's likely to be to actually start. So that's why you see that bridging from year to year. New staffing requirements. Things are getting busier. The demands and service demands for the community are increasing as anticipated. So the bylaw officer we pushed out to 2024, unless council wants to bring that back to this year. There is a slide at the very end that will discuss and council have an opportunity to discuss that position. A 0.4 janitor position, that's 2 additional days per week, that will help out significantly. The seasonal park, which is 3 months, remember we cut that in half. It used to be 6 and we brought it back down to 3 months. An admin clerk for 2024. Planning out in 2026. This is forecasted. We'll see what happens out there. So it's quite a ways out. Again, a shared West Coast inspector. That one's we wanted to put included in the 5-year plan to make sure that it's identified. Depending on development needs and planning pressures, will determine where that lies and if it needs to be actioned at that point in time. And then what we are finding is that we have long service within the municipality. So when employees and staff go on holidays, there's a significant gap in the operations. So we're increasing the casual weeks within recreation, the municipal hall, and parks. We reduced parks just a little bit by 3 weeks. So we had a buffer of 3 weeks. That allows us greater continuity in service delivery. So when somebody's off on holidays, we can backfill those positions, which helps significantly in managing the ebbs and flows of the operational cycles. That's it.
All right, moving right along. So that's the end of operations. So we just have our core revenue summary draft. So that's all the departments. And then the next one is our core expense summary draft. So all of our expenses, not including capital. And then this is not an exhaustive list, but we've got again, just bringing forward our operational projects summary. The website rebuild, again, we just highlight that it's no longer taxes. It's going to be paid for through the COVID restart grant funds that we have left over. And we've crossed out the records management consultant for 2023 and moved it to 2027. Generally speaking, most of the things on this page are not funded by taxes. A few smaller items, but generally speaking, they're reserves or RMI. Does anybody have any questions about operations before we move on to capital at all? No, I know you've heard about it before, so.
Just one question about the bylaw. In the past, we've had bylaw ambassadors just over the summer months.
Yeah.
Is that a possibility to revisit that again, as opposed to hiring another bylaw officer?
Did you want to talk about staff? Or?
Either Bruce or I can speak to it. Go ahead.
If you wish, through the mayor, because I can speak a bit to the history of the funding that's been in place in past years was we had a bylaw officer. We had funding for some bylaw ambassadors, which really was the equivalent of a half position, and that was seasonal. At the time, there were some local residents who were sort of keen to get that established, even actually prior to there being a full-time bylaw officer in Ucluelet, and so that sort of carried on, and that funding was there. That it was problematic to fill that position without those individuals in the community who were kind of keen to take on that role. It's very hard to hire somebody seasonally with those specific skills. And many of the people who are looking for seasonal work on the West Coast are not interested in being a bylaw officer. So we have had rounds of advertising and being unsuccessful and able to fill it. I think we probably would have to have housing in hand as well to offer with that if we were doing it on a seasonal position. And that the funding for the seasonal bylaw officer was removed when COVID hit, and we were looking at, what's happening with tourism? There'll be no tourism. How do we cut the budget? That was one of the things that was cut to get to a 0% increase that year. We then got COVID recovery funding, which allowed us to have a seasonal position, and we were very fortunate to find someone who was keen and very experienced and who was out here, who is now working full-time in Victoria, and the COVID funding is gone. So what we're left with, that's sort of the history, if you will, the story of how we have one bylaw officer full-time who's funded. So it's I would say it's problematic to trying to hire that as a seasonal position, because there are some pretty specific training and skills required for that, and they're in great demand. So, does that help?
Yes, thank you.
If I may just add one more piece to that, some communities try for the auxiliary RCMP to augment their bylaw enforcement during seasonal positions, or during the summer or high seasons. Those positions are exceptionally hard to fill, but they're also exceptionally expensive because they're ex-RCMP, so you're paying a premium for those individuals to come out. So moving in advance, as Mr. Gregg indicated, filling a part-time bylaw enforcement position outside of a large urban center with somebody training to get into law enforcement is very, very challenging. If bylaw enforcement is a key priority for council moving forward, then we found through last year, where we went through three bylaw officer positions to fill that seasonal position, it's best to go with a permanent full-time position, somebody that has housing, possibly somebody in the community that we can train up into the position over a period of time, or possibly find a bylaw officer that's willing to come out here. Many other communities are fighting for bylaw enforcement officers. So even if we do post for a position this year or next year, filling it will be challenging to say the least. So they're in great demand and hard to come by.
Councillor Hoare?
Excuse my ignorance. What training exactly do you need for bylaw? I mean, is it just regular law enforcement? Is it security? I'm just curious what the requirements are.
Through the mayor, there are courses that are available through the Justice Institute. So there's a bylaw level 1, bylaw level 2, that sort of thing. People come at it from various levels, and then there's specific training on things like animal control if you're doing a lot of that, because some municipalities that's a whole other function. So it's not necessarily the same as police training, but many of the same things of conflict resolution and dealing with the public and understanding the law and the rest of it. It's the kind of things that are covered within that. And I just would add to, because I forgot to mention the reservist, we did look at, and we're going down the path of, okay, if we're having a seasonal bylaw officer, do we do as Tofino has done and see about getting an RCMP reservist in? And at that time, that was a possibility, and then the RCMP were like, no, we need them elsewhere. So it's not a sure thing, and the cost, I think, because they come with a vehicle, they're basically a full-time RCMP officer, and you pay for their housing, for a 4-month reservist was the same cost as having a full-time bylaw officer on staff for 7 or 8 months, I think. So it is a premium to have the RCMP. There's definitely some pros and cons to it, but it's a challenge. Because what we find with the seasonal position is, as soon as there's a full-time position offered elsewhere, that tends to attract your staff away partway through the season. So.
Councillor Anderson?
Quick question through the mayor. OCP biannual monitoring. It looks like it got cut there, but I just don't know. I'm a new guy. I don't know what that means.
We'll provide the buzzwords and the lingo. Through the mayor, it's best practice with an official community plan is to have some kind of monitoring or check-in, because the OCP is a kind of a statement, a whole series of statements of what the municipality is going to do. What are we doing over the next 30 years? 378 of those statements, I think, is in our OCP. And so monitoring to see how are we doing on things like protecting the environment or encouraging economic development or financial planning or all the things that are in there. That's kind of best practice. And so we'd had a conversation with Tofino on saying, well, let's do this in parallel, perhaps building on like what the CBT does with their vital signs report. They monitor all kinds of things, but maybe adding like a page to how's Ucluelet doing? How's Tofino doing? If we sort of had a page of some things that they look at every couple of years to sort of like, hey, how are we doing? What do we need to focus on? What's the progress? That's really what that was about. So that was initial conversations. And so with the budget and looking at the numbers, we kicked it out a year to get started later in the 5-year plan.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gregg. So here's some good news that Mayor McEwen was able to talk about at the last meeting. So on February 10th, actually, it was announced by the province that there's a Growing Communities Fund, over $1 billion to 188 different towns and municipalities. So it's a one-time grant to address unique infrastructure and amenities demands, complementing existing infrastructure such as sewer and water and recreation facilities. And it's estimated that the District of Ucluelet would receive approximately $1 million before the end of March. So, of course, I kind of had to tell everybody not to get too excited because we're scrounging for money, but our recommendations, Dwayne and I had a conversation, and our recommendations in no particular order necessarily would be to put the $490,000 that we are likely going to need for the stormwater project on Peninsula Road, and that is a shared project with Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. And then we know that we have to repair the Mercantile water line between us and our First Nations neighbors, and that our portion is approximately $348,000. We would have had to take that out of our water reserve fund, which I'm trying to protect because we need to do the water treatment project. And then whatever's left over, we would put towards building the water treatment and capacity project. This is a pretty big win for us because it helps us not deplete our reserves by $1 million. It helps us reallocate these funds. So we really don't want to apply it to anything new or new ideas. We're just trying to finish some of the things that we have to do and need to do. And the stormwater and the water replacement line, those were actually surprises. There were things that happened or occurred that we hadn't planned for. So it's a big expense, and it was something that we would have had to pay for. So this is a really timely announcement for us. So we're pretty happy. So I thought I would just put that front and center. I've included the link to the news release that talks about it a little bit more on what kinds of things you can use it on. But that was good news for us. So these are just the capital projects. You just saw them on January 31st. I just slid them right over and made any changes. Pretty much the only changes we had were maybe some carryover amounts, or if we were able to fund something differently. So we've had a couple of grant successes. So we're highlighting them on these slides. we're still waiting, as Mayor McEwen alluded to. We don't know about the grant yet for the fire hall, but we leave that slide front and center until we find out. And then once we find out, we'll see if we can source out some other grants as well for the fire hall. No changes on the Village Green Playground. We still have $359,000 remaining. It's fully funded by RMI, and it's something that I know Miss Fortune's really excited to get going on. Same Inner Boat Basin Pathway, which we're commonly referring to as the Safe Harbor Pathway. Again, funded primarily through RMI with potentially some Small Craft Harbor Reserve funding, although we would continue to source out some grant or other sources for that as well. Affordable housing. This slide hasn't changed at all. We're just waiting for a letter from the developer that's going to be doing Lot 13 at 731 Marine Drive, the 33 units. So we're just waiting to see if that amount is going to change or not. We'll see. And then we've got our $225,000 set aside for 1300 Peninsula Road for the supportive housing. And then keeping in mind the Housing Authority or Housing Corporation contract, if it's something that we decide to go ahead with at some point, we would need some funding out of our affordable housing reserve for that. And then on the right hand side, again, we've just got our estimated balance at the end of 2022 should be about 1.1 million. And we'll see how the district and council want to move forward with any affordable housing initiatives beyond that. So that's where we're at with this one. Village Green has begun. So we're happy about that. I actually saw somebody put a drone video on Facebook the other day. So is that Jeff? Yes, we were able to see. I think he just did it on his own. It wasn't something that was initiated by us, but it was kind of neat to see it from the air. They certainly seem to be working quickly and efficiently. Again, no tax dollars associated with this project. It's all Tourism Dependent Community Fund, gas tax, and RMI funds on that. Hopefully still on track for June 1st. Getting the nod from Mr. McIntosh, so it's sounding like it's good. Amphitrite House. We have $1.4 million remaining as of year end. We're dealing with the contractor on that, just finalizing the contract so we can start construction. Yeah. Peninsula Road, just again, it's a set of 2 or 3 slides here. So this is the vitalization piece, which would be mostly above ground, gas tax, RMI, and the CCRF grant. We are moving forward with getting the design completed, and I believe there's a report coming to council soon on some options to look at for this particular project. And then this is our stormwater piece. So this was the project that kind of came out of nowhere that we realized, we need to team up with Modi on this one. So we're finalizing our agreements with the Ministry of Transportation at the moment, but you can see in yellow, I've highlighted the $490,000 instead of having to use general reserves. We're able to apply the Growing Communities Fund to that. And then hopefully Modi would pick up the rest. We just don't know what our portion is, like what percentage of the stormwater system is ours. And then just a summary slide for all 3 of the projects. So there's no paving costs to us. They still plan to come forward perhaps in 2024 to pave it. So we're a little bit under the gun to get these other 2 projects finalized, but Mr. McIntosh and Mr. Lawrence are certainly working on moving them forward. Larch Road, it's another good one for us. We have received the confirmation that we did get the BC Active Transportation Grant. So that's exciting. It's going to move forward. It is scheduled for 2024 construction. We'd be doing some work ahead of time to finish the design on that. And DOU's portion is about $198,000. And again, our portion for the water supply replacement line, you can see where instead of using water reserves, we would like to use the Growing Communities Fund out of that one instead. That one's scheduled to replace this year. And our lift station bypass, you also heard about that last meeting. This is the first one that we identified as the top priority, building a bypass for this particular lift station at $135,000 coming from the Sewer Capital Reserve Fund. We moved around our fleet just the tiniest of bits. We really need to replace the 1-ton and one of the parks vehicles. So we've moved out the F-150 truck to 2024. So we just kind of flipped the two around. The emergency response vehicle is in relation to the deputy chief or whoever's on call that particular weekend. We may not have to spend all $70,000. We're in line waiting for potentially a vehicle later in the year that's going to be about $50,000, and then we would just have to decal it and add whatever we need to it. But we're hoping to see some cost savings there. And then unfortunately, we do have to replace an engine within the next 5 years. So I know the chief is looking at some ideas on how to do that. Water treatment, we've talked quite a bit about this. With the project coming in at $20 million and how we can't afford to take out a $13 million loan. So I'm just going to skip ahead to this slide here because we are currently taking steps to refine the project. We did collect 3% in 2022 in property taxes and put it in the Water Reserve Fund. When we get to talk about taxes shortly here, you'll see that the 3% is included in the ask this year in the taxation rate. We are reviewing the water and sewer user fees to make sure not only the programs pay for themselves, but that we can make sure that we're collecting from everybody using the system, not just the property owners in Ucluelet. Deferring the long-term borrowing as much as possible. So looking at any cash options that we can free up by, using grant funds instead of using reserve funds will delay and decrease the amount of money that we need to borrow in the long term. And of course, using the leftover funds in that BC Communities Fund to put towards the project as well. This is our debt servicing slide. So I've just basically just brought it back, and I've just, all I'm showing here is I'm crossing out the bottom two fleet loans. They're short-term 5-year loans. The rates fluctuate every day. It's a variable rate. So I just put lines through it because I'd like to pay them out in 2022. It's going to cost about $426,000. It'll save us about $43,000. Plus, I don't have to include the yearly ask in the tax requisition. And I'm going to suggest that I do that through our general reserves fund, our unrestricted fund, to do that. So that'll free up some cash there as well. The first two are long-term loans, so we can't pay them off early, if anybody is asking. The long-term loans get refinanced. They give us a new interest rate at the 10-year mark. So for us, we were actually really lucky during the pandemic because the UCC 10-year mark came during the pandemic. So we're only paying 1.47%, and that's locked in for the next 5 years, and then they'll refinance in 5 years. The engine number one is 2.88% as well. So relatively speaking, if we tried to take out a loan today, it would be quite high. So in our case, we got lucky. And then now we're just at our capital project summary pages. I don't think that we canceled any. I think the only things that we did were just applying different grant money to the different projects to free up their reserve funds. And I added in the CMHC rapid housing project as well. So there's 3 of those slides. Some of them are new, some of them are carried forward. I've got them grouped together. COVID grant leftover will pay for finishing up the main hall, audiovisual section. And not a lot of taxes there, mostly just our vehicles, unfortunately, are taxes this year because the reserve fund doesn't have anything in it. I think it's got $11,000 in it, so it's kind of sad right now. So I'm going to pause there for a minute and see if anybody has any questions about any of the capital projects that we have on the go. If anybody wants a progress report or a question about anything. No, okay. Let me turn my page. This is what everybody wants to talk about. What is it going to be? Okay, so just a bit on property taxes. The value that BC Assessments puts on your property is based on July 1st of the previous year. So all of the assessed values are within our completed roll that comes out at the end of December. We know that the market kind of dropped a little bit probably after July 1st, 2022. So some people are probably feeling that like their properties are being a little bit overvalued. I guess the thing to comment on is we may see an adjustment next year when we get the completed roll next year, because it will be based on July 1st, 2023. When it slowed down a bit, we may find that the assessed values are less. So that could have a financial impact on the district. So generally speaking, we like to show this graphic because there's often a lot of confusion. Oh,
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Sure,
Just on that
sure.
last point, at the LGLA conference, we listened to a presentation from BC Assessment that what I was hoping to get out of it was, well, can you give us any indication of what the trend's going to be? They didn't address it in the presentation. I asked the presenters afterwards, and they said, oh, we have no idea at all, which I didn't think was particularly helpful. Do you have any indication? What's your gut feeling? What's your perspective on what we're going to see in terms of the average? Is it going to go up? Is it going to go down? Is it going to stay?
Well, it's hard. It is hard to say. And I don't work for BC Assessments, but I know I was pretty surprised when they took the business class and assessed it down during the pandemic with no notice to us whatsoever. So that hurt us financially. We had to jump a little bit. But I mean, if it's based on the market, we've still had a pretty busy market in Ucluelet. Like business has been selling and houses have been selling. It slowed down a little bit in the summer last year, but I don't know that they were selling for less dollars than what was listed. I don't know so that's what I don't know. We know that interest rates went up and we know that the market slowed down, but we don't get any indication from BC Assessments other than there's a preview roll in October. That will tell me if there's any new trends. But I'm kind of in the dark, just like you are, and your guess is as good as mine at this point, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it go down a little bit.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this graphic from BC Assessments is a good graphic that we share with our property owners, because we know that the average increase for a single family home in Ucluelet is 21% this year. But it doesn't automatically translate into you're paying 21% more in property taxes. So this slide indicates if you're lower than the average, your taxes they'll decrease. But it has to be a lot lower than average to decrease. So if it's only a little bit under average, instead of paying 10%, you might be paying 5%. So it just depends how how below average you are. And it's the one situation where you strive to be very much less than average. The only time. If you're similar to the average change, then your taxes probably aren't going to change. They're going to be roughly the same as last year. And if you're higher than average, your taxes are likely going to increase. Excuse me. This is our completed roll for 2023 compared to 2022 and 2021. So starting on the right-hand side, you can see how the bottom line has increased in all areas since 2021. In 2020, you would have seen the business class had decreased a little bit, but they're making a comeback. And there's a link at the bottom of most of these slides if people wanted to go in and check out any of the ads or the statistics as well. So does that laptop have my notes on it? Just 1 second. Can I see it better? I think I had some notes, that I wanted to say. I don't know how to navigate this particular. I have to scroll in it. Okay. In here?
Yeah, in there.
Oh, here we go. But I need to be back one. Sorry, my apologies. So 30 single-family residences have been added since the 2022 revised roll. So we picked up 30 homes, and there's 15 less vacant properties. So that just means that they've built houses on those 15 properties and flipped them into single homes. We've also got 11 more stratas since 2022. So overall, there's 26 more residential additions since 2022. There is a lag also in BC assessments and how quickly that they pick up any of the subdivisions or any of the changes. So for example, Whispering Pines, we know there's 3 or 4 or 5 new units that have brought in that never existed before that still aren't showing up on the roll. And because one of them is mine, I've actually emailed them and said, you need to get me on the roll because it's a bad look for me not to pay taxes. So much as I wouldn't want to pay them, but I need to be on the roll. So it's not below us to actually drive around town, and that's what we did a couple years ago. It seemed to be taking so long for BC Assessments to put homes onto our roll, which makes everybody else pay. We actually, the previous manager of finance and I drove around town and wrote down some of the addresses of some of the new homes that had people living in them for over a year. And we wrote down all the addresses and we sent them off to BC Housing. And then that's how we were able to work with them to get our roll caught up. So whatever works. What else can I? Oh, I also, if you were on the BC Assessments website, you would see the average is 21%, but they don't have a graphic that shows the different parts of Ucluelet and what the averages are. So I did some spot checking. So some of the trends this year, St. Jakes and Bay Street are generally above average, as well as Hemlock. Rainforest this year was a very mixed bag of both over and under. Holly Crescent and Larch are, Holly Crescent was mostly average, Larch was mostly under average. Marine Drive was quite a mix as well, but they were way above average last year. Most of them were at 85%, and the average was 43. Whispering Pines, above average, but they're not brick and mortar homes, so it's not a lot of value there. All of Tyee Terrace was under average. All of Terrace Beach, 35%. Most of the Black Rock, anywhere from 30 to 60%. With a lot of them split class, that one's a little bit worrisome because in the revised roll, we might see that value come down once the accommodators report their visits for the year. There's a formula that BC Assessments does, so it could flip. Some of them could flip back to residential instead of business. It depends how many times they've rented out their units. The Ridge is all over 30%. Primera is 11. The Morridge, the condos down by the harbor, they were way below average last year, and this year they're way over. And and Water's Edge is 17%. So, you know, a lot of them that I was seeing, a lot of the trends, it seemed like the ones that were over average tended to have a lot of places in residential zones that are also, you know, short-term rentals. It was difficult for me to find one area of town that, unlike last year, was, you know, any group of just regular homes. It didn't seem like there was any patterns really evolving. So that's what I did with the spot checking. But whereas last year you were either way over or way under. There was really no middle ground last year. Okay. Sure.
A quick question. I'm just trying to get my head around what you were saying before about driving around and looking for houses that weren't listed by BCS. So what happens? So when you go to do taxation, and then if you were, say I had a new house and it was missed, do I just get out of paying taxes that year, or is it would catch up to you?
That's exactly what happened. So you would be paying taxes on the vacant lot, because that would be registered with BC Assessments. But if there's a lag or a break in the information coming from the building log or land titles or anything like that, or if BC Assessments doesn't send somebody out regularly, because that's what they're supposed to do, we run the risk of a bunch of people not paying tax on the improvements that they've done to their properties. They'd be paying tax on the vacant land, but it's worth more with the house on it. So it was getting to the point where, you know, I remember the previous mayor saying, hey, this person's been living in their house for 3 years. Why aren't they paying? So that's kind of what prompted us to start driving around town and seeing, okay, what's happening here. So a lot of them have got cut up. With the mobile homes, there's a mobile home registry, but there's a big lag in how that information goes from that registry to BC Assessment. So we're just trying to find ways to help bridge the gap there. We do send monthly our building register to BC Assessment, but there still seems to be a bit of a lag. But it's something that we don't mind if we have to drive around town, quite frankly, because if they're not paying, then the rest of you are.
That begs the question: will you be driving around this year? That's.
I will be driving around this year.
I like that. Awesome. Thank you.
Seems a bit unorthodox, but whatever works.
And one more question. You mentioned the other night that you had quite a number of properties that have challenged their assessment.
Oh, yes. 95 appeals this year. So there's a lot of appeals this year. Yeah.
And I would guess that's appealing to lower as opposed to increase.
Yeah, they would want to be assessed at a lower value, or they might be questioning the class that they're in. Okay. Oh, wrong clicker. Okay. I've got too many things to do here. Okay, so I just threw this slide up. The local government has a statistics page, and the link is on this particular slide, and you can pull off, if you like statistics like I do, you can pull off any stats that you want. This particular one I put together, and it's from 2022, just a comparative residential home, and what taxes go with that. The taxes that people pay, so this would be their property taxes, parcel taxes, and their utility flat charges would be included in here. So this shows us that we have Ucluelet has the fourth most valuable homes out of this particular grouping. But residents are paying a little bit less. They're coming in fifth by about $500 a home. And then we like to bring these slides here forward. So in 2022, the average homeowner paid $355 a month. And then I've listed all the services, keeping in mind that this particular dollar amount includes all of the other taxes that we collect on behalf of others, so hospital, police, school, the airport, garbage, ACRD, all of that kind of stuff. So it's not just the municipal services. And then I break it down further into the municipal services only. So for $172 a month in 2022, that's the cost of the municipal services only, the taxes that people pay. Excuse me. So we're just about at the tax dollar ask here. So what I've done is I've taken the $18 million budget for 2023 and I've just made the pie chart. So on the left is our revenues and on the right is our expenses. And this is just to highlight that although, you know, taxes is something we talk about a lot, it only represents 24% of our revenue in terms of the district. We're very grant reliant. On particularly with capital. And this one you'll never be able to read on a slide, which is why you have a printed copy, but this is everything we have on one easy sheet. So it's split up by our departments, core services, and then our non-capital projects, and then our capital projects and any transfers to reserves that we're making. So you've got your total expenses at 17 million. And then everything on the right is how all of those departments are being funded and the different funding sources. I can't read it that small, so I'm going to just kind of guess. We've got the sales of services. So anytime we can charge money for programs or anything like that, that's where that's where the sales of services are coming from. Water user fees, sewer user fees, things like that. And then we've got our grant column. The next column over is anything from RMI, gas tax, MRDT. And by contributions, I mean, for example, the shared project that we have for stormwater, where MOTI would be contributing some funds towards that project. And then we have the special column for our COVID restart grant. We have $120,000 and change left over. So we talked about spending it in this fashion. Any contributions from dedicated reserves or DCCs is in the next column. We're not borrowing any money this year. And then from the unrestricted reserves, which is leftover tax dollars that are not spent, we would be paying off those 2 fleet loans. And then what the difference between the two is the blue column. So we need whatever's left over is what we need. So we need 4.3 million in taxes to do all the things that we want to do in this particular budget for 2023. But that would include the parcel taxes as well. So I don't know if Mr. Rotenberg can move that window over or not. So I'm going to give you a bunch of examples of what this would look like, but my software spits out a nice slide like this. So it shows on an average home, average single family home, it's working out to be 10.04%. That includes the 3% that we're collecting for the water treatment project, as well as 1.5% for a capital and infrastructure levy, just to get us started to contributing properly to our reserve funds. So if you subtract the 3% and the 1.5%, we're not quite even asking for what the inflation rate was. So we're going to start with that, and I'm going to just give you some examples because I like to spot check and just show you what it actually looks like to real people. So this is one of our buddies on Pine Street. He is lower than average this year. He was lower than average last year too. So in 2022, his house value increased at 25%, but the average for town was 43. So he was so far below average, he actually paid less than he did in 2021. This year, he's still below average, but not too low before average, so he's paying $76. So even between the 2 years, we're really only talking about $26. So he's probably doing okay. The one in the middle is on Marine Drive. Increase in value of 14%, so lower than average compared to last year. They had to pay more last year because they were at 53. So this year, below average, so their increase is $100 instead of $184. So if I just back up to this slide where it says single family, it's saying if you're very, very average, you're probably going to pay about $184 extra for the year. Pop forward, they're paying $100 because they're below average. The next one on Holly Crescent is very, very, very average, 20.17. I had to look really hard to find one that was extremely average. So there they are. There's that $185. Excuse me. And we put the little graphics beside that coincide with the BC assessment slide there to hopefully that helps visualize what we're talking about here. And then I like to show a B&B that's in a residential zone, just for fun. So these people are above average, so they're at 33% this year instead of 21%. They're in a residential home on St. Jake's, but they have 2 B&Bs. Their increase would be about $474 this year. And then the next one is one of my favorite restaurants. They actually paid less both years in a row. He's very, very under average this year. So 0.24. I mean, it's pretty hard to get less than 1. So I think they're going to be pretty happy this year. And then there's a business on Forbes. I don't remember what business it is, but they increased by 28%. They're a business full-on Class 6, so they're going to be paying $650 more this year. It's still only $4,700 for a business, but nevertheless, that's the increase. That 21% average increase in Ucluelet is based on residential rates, not business. So I didn't put the little house beside them.
Is there an average for the business class? Like, was it an increase? Was it a decrease? Do you know?
It was an overall increase to us. Yeah. But I don't know what the average percentage was. I could work it out if we went back to that assessed values slide in Class 6 and just took the difference between the two. And then I think this is the last example. So I like to also show a split class. So this is one that has a business and a residential. It's not a short-term rental. It's just a regular, it's a restaurant with some residential component to it. So they're actually paying, although their value has gone up 19% in residential and 6% in business, they're actually having a decrease of $266 over last year. So even though, I show the slide that says 10%, you can see that very few people actually are at 10. It could be higher, it could be lower, it could be less, it could be more. It's very dependent on the situation and what the assessed value is. So, the newspapers always say, oh, the city of Vancouver is 19%, but it's kind of an inaccurate number. I mean, it's only if you're very, very average, would it ever be 10.04%. So it could be more, it could be less. Oops. I just wanted to bring forward the budget adjustment slide. We showed this to you, I think, at the last meeting that showed how we refined the budget to increase some of our revenues and maybe cut back a little. So we were trying to come forward with a starting point of a tax increase that wasn't, way over the top. Does anybody have any questions before I go to the next slide? Is that making sense? Is it, yeah.
I've got a question, but I'm not sure if this is the right point to ask it.
Okay.
And I gotta go back. So I'm back at the services provided, what you get for your 355 per month. And this is a me specific question.
Sure.
So one of the things that's listed is the garbage recycling and waste management is covered because that's money that we pay to the ACRD.
Correct.
So I live in a strata. We also have garbage and recycling fees that we have to pay every month on top of these. But so am I paying twice for something?
Are you getting a garbage bill from the ACRD?
From Ozard.
That's a good question. Do you know? I know that they bill us within the tax requisition for the garbage, and then we pay the ACRD based on the taxes that they ask for. I know but I also know that if people don't pay their garbage bill with the ACRD, they actually get us to collect for them. I don't know how it works with private stratas. It could be that there is no taxes being collected from you for that service.
I believe we can double check on this, but similar to businesses contract out their garbage collection. So if you own a business or in a strata property, the strata is classified as a business. The ACRD doesn't actually collect garbage from you, so you have to contract that out to, in this case, Ozard, and you get a bill from Ozard for your garbage and recycling and whatever else you're doing. So strata properties and businesses do not pay the utility charge, if you will, for garbage pickup unless through the ACRD, you would be paying it through a contract with the service provider, the service contractor, which would be Ozard in this case.
Okay, so I just kind of need to double check my property tax bill from.
Yeah, come
Last
on
year
into the
and-
office and we'll
Yeah,
pull
I'm
it
just-
off and have a look at
I'm
it.
curious. It was one of those things. As the treasurer for the strata, I'm kind of aware of the bills.
Through the mayor, the other piece of this, and it just may also, if there's confusion there, is there's garbage collection, but there may also still be an ACRD requisition for all properties because they're still running a landfill. So that it may be the rate is different between those multifamily, which are treated like businesses, but you may be paying to contract the collection, but still be a tax requisition because there's still all the rest of the service that's there for everyone. So I think.
Totally going to be looking at it. Sorry, just thought I'd bring it up. We're not the only strata in town, and it's something that I've been meaning to ask, and I keep forgetting, and this seemed like a point to do it.
Great.
I have one question through the mayor. The slide on, I just wanted to clarity on 2022 comparative residential taxes and charges on a representative house. How is representative defined there?
It's the average market value of the home in July of 2022.
Based on all homes?
In that class. So a single family home, they're saying is worth in Ucluelet $897,000. So if you're bang on at that amount, your extra taxes this year would be $184.
Okay. I'm looking more at like this, well, when you did same kind of thing, but the comparative, right?
Yeah.
And so it's 1.5 for Tofino. I thought that was, yeah.
Yeah, Tofino's homes are double the value of ours still.
Wow.
I know. It's crazy.
There you go. Thanks.
Yeah. We don't have a big business class either compared to Tofino. So the residential taxes wear it a little bit. They have more of a burden. It's at 63%. Whereas Tofino, they have more resorts than we only have one resort, so they have many more businesses than us. So as soon as you have more businesses in town that are in commercial zones, the burden tends to shift back off of residents. So that 63% of people paying taxes would start to shift down. But we don't have the big business class to draw from.
I'm just thinking this lends itself to Councillor Mafty's question earlier about where's the trend going. If Ucluelet continues on a trend towards similar housing pricing as Tofino, as we become more aware, more known as tourist destination, increase picking up those demands, then our housing pricing will likely get closer and closer over time to what Tofino looks like. Now, how long that'll take, how quickly it'll resolve, if it goes in that direction, is where we'd love one of those magic crystal balls. But that could be an indicator as well as where the trends are going. So will we see probably a decrease in property values, maybe a blip, but the overall trend, I would anticipate that it's going to keep climbing upwards and slowly catch up to our neighbors down the other end of the peninsula.
Which may make businesses feel more attractive to come to Ucluelet instead of Tofino. So we're hoping. Okay. Any more questions? I think I have one more slide. Just have to go back. Okay. So this is our sales job, if you will. So we just wanted to give you an idea of some of the things that we cut from the budget and what the cost per year or per month would be. So as an example, if we hired a bylaw officer in July of this year, the cost, including benefits, would be almost $50,000. So based on the assessed values of the homes, it would be an extra $40 a year, or $3.34 a month. And then we've done the same thing for something like the top dresser, which would help the parks department out. It's $15,000, so it would be it's a one-time purchase, but it works out to $12 a year or $1 a month. Or if we wanted to bump up the park seasonal by 3 months, making it 6 months, it's $13 a year or $1.09 a month. And then the total of those three things would be $64 a year or $5.34 a month. Again, based on a very average single family home. So, because sometimes, you hear 10%, it can sound really high, or you can hear $184 and it can sound really high. But once you start breaking it down, it may or may not feel like a big expense. So we just wanted to sort of display that for you. We don't know with this with new council if there's a desire to say have a bylaw officer or not. We're happy to make changes or up or down. But we just thought that this would be a good one to show you what it looks like when we're refining the budget over time.
I just have an answer for Council Flora from our senior finance clerk. She just messaged me that we do not collect garbage taxes for strats.
Through the mayor, I just got a message from our senior finance clerk, Livia Viverva, that we do not actually collect taxes on garbage for stratas or businesses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
I'm
you
happy to know they're watching.
There you go. Somebody's paying attention. And thank you very much it means I don't have to go and do the hunt. Much appreciated.
Fantastic.
So that would be a good slide to have at the open house to see how the public feels about those three things.
Yep, absolutely.
I would be interested in hearing Brittany's take on needing someone else with her to help her, especially when the summer comes.
I think Mr. Gregg would also be a good person to ask as her supervisor, or Mr. Lawrence.
I've already got the mic. So this is an opportune time for us to get some direct feedback from council. Are you happy with the 10.04 and the associated approximately, give or take a lot, on that $185 request? If council is interested in seeing any of these items, and I know Ms. Fortune would be thrilled, and the Parks team would be thrilled to see items reintroduced back into the budget. And with respect to the bylaw position, we're unable to provide full coverage, especially during the summer months of the municipality, because our bylaw officer is, works 40 hours a week. We restructure that for weekends during the summer months where we can, but with one person, it's very, very difficult to patrol and deal with the campers that are utilizing our streets, and that while continuing to monitor our short-term rental compliance programs, all the other building issues that pop up from time to time. We have a number that have just come up that are quite significant. So our bylaw team is quite thin for a resort municipality. So it is something that I think council saw in previous terms as something that should be considered. We removed it because of the total cost at that point in time. I think we started somewhere around 22%. Thought that might be a little bit hard to swallow. So we worked very diligently to bring it back. So now we're at that 10.04, and if bylaw enforcement is a priority for council, then this would be a great opportunity for Ms. Monteith to make any adjustments to the budget, up or down, remove anything that council feels is inappropriate or no longer a priority, make any adjustments, any of those directions. This is the time for us to do that. Then we go into the public feedback, but it would be good to have it either included or not for that public engagement session.
I'll chime in happily on the bylaw, because not having it full time in the summer when we're busy is a problem. It's been long weekends and you're trying to get in touch with somebody and there's nobody to get in touch with, or, not that I'm dropping that on planning, just that when we don't have two people, you can't cover a full week. And as Mr. Gregg has said, it is hard to find somebody part-time in the summer.
Through the mayor, I guess this is more of a comment than a question, but during the bylaw change at the end of the last council term, and the business license fees for bed and breakfast went up to $450 for the first unit and $150 for each unit after that. Part of the reasoning behind that was to afford a bylaw officer, but I'm not seeing that reflected in these numbers, and that it's totally coming from taxes. So I'd just like to know if that extra business license revenue was being put towards the bylaw officer. My concern is that we talk about 10% like it's not much, but people are already paying 10% more for their groceries, 50% more for their gas. Everything is more expensive. So it's death by 1,000 cuts, and I want to make sure that we're not operating in isolation, thinking we're the only ones adding to the cost of living around here. Not everybody is in a union and can demand money. Not everybody gets annual pay raises. So there is hardship out there already, and I just think that everybody needs to tighten their belt, not just residents, but also district staff, us, everybody. So I want to make sure that we're not putting people out of their homes. Or I was in the co-op a couple of months ago, and Mr. Noodles was on sale, And there was a woman there, and she had her cart absolutely full, and it broke my heart. So I want to think of those people too.
By Mr. Noodles.
Breaks my heart.
That is a good question, Councillor Kennington, about the extra business license fees for B&Bs.
I think so. Councillor Kennington had it correct. When we were looking at the business licensing increases, part of those funds were to go towards a bylaw officer. It doesn't pay for a full officer; it just contributes to it. All of those funds go into what's called general revenue. So it's a matter of balancing that all out, right? So we still feel that a bylaw officer is a permanent full-time second bylaw officer is important for the municipality due to the increased volumes of tourism and the challenges that creates for a municipality. At the same time, we were very cognizant also of what Councillor Kennington was indicating, that there's a lot of inflation, there's a lot of demands on people. The CPI has gone up, food pricing has gone up significantly. Living in a remote community, well, I wouldn't say remote, but a rural community on Vancouver Island, food costs are even more challenging, just because of where we live and being a resort municipality. So that's why we were proposing to council to consider, maybe this is something that we push forward to another year to help bring down that total requisition that we're looking at. We still need to cover off the base increases of the day-to-day business operations. Council has seen in all of our projects that figure that Ms. Monteith brought forward, that what was the construction index inflation was 12.5%, and that's what's helping to increase the cost of doing projects like the Village Green and everything else that we're doing. So we were very cognizant of that, but wanted to bring this forward for consideration for council, saying how important is additional bylaw support this year. If it is a critical key component for council, this is the additional cost to residents on average home. So that's help to provide a little bit of context to that. So yes, the money is being collected for it. Yes, it can be allocated towards bylaw enforcement, but it is into general revenue, so it's a little bit of a shell game.
I can just add a little bit to that as well. I remember when we brought the business licenses forward, the day in the life of even just a business license, it hits the finance and admin department, it hits the planning department to check for zoning, it hits bylaw for inspection, it hits the fire department for their inspections. The enforcement of business licenses is both bylaw and often the fire department. So it, and also those costs go up. The people that we already have in place, those costs are going up already anyway. So, the increased cost of the business licenses wasn't to hire a new bylaw officer. It was to cover all of the costs associated with, business licensing in town. But, I definitely, echo Dwayne's comments and we're cognizant of the budget and the tax increases, which is why we tried to bring it down as much as we could and pull certain things out if it's all right with you to wait for different items. Oh, Mr.
So
Craig.
you're looking for an answer for us on these three potential considerations.
I think we're just kind of throwing it out. I mean, we would be happy with everything, but this is council's budget, not my budget, not staff's budget. So we've put our best foot forward today. We've refined the budget and we've come forward with the 10.04. But we wanted to give you an example just in case something was particularly important to you that you wanted to get done or remove, so that we could get some direction today. I'd make the changes over the weekend and then put it out on Monday.
Maybe we'll just do them one at a time. How does council feel about the extra full-time bylaw officer?
Can I just chime in briefly with a general statement? I feel that one of the concepts, one of the terms that's come up over and over. I should preface all of this by saying that I commend district staff for all of the work and communication. It's been super useful. So nothing that I'm going to say should be interpreted as criticism. One of the things that has been driven home to us is this concept of level of service. I feel that we enjoy a very high level of service in this community. The more that I get to peer behind the scenes and look at the spreadsheets behind that level of service, the more I think that perhaps we enjoy a level of service that is disproportionate in the sense that we're getting more, perhaps more than we need, and perhaps more than we can afford. And I want to strongly echo the point that for a lot of people who are living here and trying to live here and trying to get by here, I think if you were to ask them, where they would rather spend a little bit of money, they would think of the Mr. Noodles before they would think of hiring another bylaw officer, or a lot of the things that are sort of nice, but I don't think that there are priorities for a lot of the people who live here. I'm also just kind of, as someone who struggles to hire people, I'm just sort of like amused to juxtapose average house value of $897,000 with a salary of $50,000 to bring somebody. Like, where's that person gonna live? Maybe in the type of situation that's gonna have bylaw knocking on their door. So the irony's not lost on me. So I'll just say that in a very general sense, and then if at the mayor's recommendation we go through the items, maybe we can all just give like a yay or nay or something. Yeah.
So, bylaw. Anybody?
I'd say no. I wouldn't support that myself.
Councillor Kennington?
I'm going to say nay as well.
Councillor Anderson?
I would have to say nay at this time.
And Councillor Hoare?
Well, I think that, we saw during the pandemic how important it was to have full-time bylaw. So I find it really difficult. But that being said, I totally hear what you're saying about inflation, because believe me, every single truckload of produce that I deal with at work, I have to look at the prices and they bounce up all the time. And I don't like charging people.
There are a number of staples that I buy at the grocery store that I swear to God, every month they go up and they never come down. And that's not like treats. That's like, I need to put this food on the table, and I'm not unique. I am not a unique person in this community.
No, and I'll tell you that we literally price check 3 times a week. Every single truck that comes in for produce, we price check, because the price of a case of something can rise. It can double from one truck to the next. Which means that I might not be charging enough to even cover my cost on it. So, believe me, we don't raise the prices on purpose, but I do also drop prices every week. So they bounce up and down based on where stuff is coming from, and especially when we're talking about fresh things. Believe me, I'm very aware of inflation. I don't have a lot of spare money either. Yeah. But I also know how important it has been when I am standing shelving apples and someone comes up and talks about the person that was trying to pee in the ditch in front of their house because they were literally sleeping in a car on the side of the street. And that's a bylaw thing. And if we don't have people, because unfortunately it is a complaints-driven bylaw because we don't have enough staff for it not to be, or money, like not magic money coming that we can print downstairs. So it's problematic.
I get that. And through the mayor, one of the things that would lead me to say nay is in the really nice breakdown, that pie chart that we were shown about the number and type of complaints and resolution that bylaw currently deals with. Again, this is no criticism, but it really struck me that it is an ambassadorial role. Very, very few of those interactions actually resulted in some kind of ticket or citation. And so, yeah, I don't want people peeing in my front yard either. Like that, I think it's pretty safe to say that would be unanimous if we put it to the community. But, it's also sort of like,
What does it do?
Like what does it do? Like we're looking to pay someone $50,000 a year to say, oh, have you considered not peeing there? If you continue peeing there, I'm gonna have to ask you to pee somewhere else, and then if this continues, I might give you a ticket. And a lot of these people are in and out, and to sort of revisit, I don't want to put words in Councillor Kennington's mouth, but a lot, I feel like a lot of the visitation that we get, a lot of the complaints that bylaw is dealing with are people who are visiting this community. They're visiting this community because it's marketed and promoted as a tourist destination. Maybe this is something that should be funded much more directly by the tourism industry, rather than asking, your average citizen to say, hey, how would you feel about, spending money on a bylaw officer to deal with all of these people that are coming and spending their money elsewhere? And I'm not anti-bylaw. I would chalk this one up to more of a want than a need. So I'm not trying to say bylaw's bad, but
Of the three, bylaw would be my top pick for sure. But since we're so divided on it, I think we'll just leave it as it is and put this out to the public to comment on, and maybe give them little sticky dots so they can say, of the three, what would you like to see, or do you not want to see any of them?
I'd agree with that.
I totally agree with that, and I think it's important for us all to consider the fact that ultimately we're here to represent the public. One thing that I'm wondering at this open house, if this information is presented, if it can be presented in a very clear way where the question isn't, would you like a bylaw officer? The question is, would you like to pay this much more on your taxes for this service, yes or no? Because that no one's going to say, or very few people I suspect are going to say, yeah, we want all the services we can get. But very few people are going to be like, yeah, take my money so that we can hire more.
Well, that's what this slide shows, exactly that.
As long as we're clear on that, because I've seen questions posed, I've been posed questions like this before, where it's like, well, is this what you'd like to see in your community? Sure, but without having a clear understanding of what the costs to me directly are.
Mr. Lawrence?
And sorry, just a small point of clarity. So that what council sees in front of them now, that 49,808, that's for July through December. So the cost is actually would be another 50,000 in next year's budget. So the total cost for a bylaw officer is about $100,000 on an annual basis. This, because this position is starting in July, this is 50% of the total costs. So just to be very clear on that, I didn't want council to be misled that it's only 50 grand for a bylaw officer. It's not. It's about 100. The reason that we're presenting it this way is because it's impacting this year's property taxes. That $40 per year, it'd be another 40 in the following year as well.
Wouldn't it be 100 in the following year essentially? Because instead of another.
Oh yeah,
So
probably
that's a big
yeah.
difference.
Boy, I should apply for that job.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Where do I drop off my resume? I mean, a lot through the mayor. A lot of these positions pay so far above the average income in this town that I just don't know what to say, because we're asking people who make the average here, which is $22,000 a year, to foot the bill for someone to be paid $100,000 a year with annual increases and benefits and everything else. So I know it's hard to attract people, but maybe, as Mark was saying, it's more of a want than a need, or it's not even more of a want than a need. It's, can we do it? Can we afford it? Because every day people have to make that decision, and it's over things like food. So I just want to make sure that people are clear that people in this town don't make a lot of money, and we're asking a lot, and we're providing a lot, but a lot of that is going to tourists, not to locals. Thank you.
So are we all agreed to leave the budget as it is then, and see what happens at the open house?
I think so. I've got a quick going back. I'm just looking at the big things in here, and I'm not saying that they're not all important, but I just want to be the devil's advocate for some of the bigger ones, and just with the deputy fire chief position, and I'm not knocking the fire department. You guys do an amazing job. You've saved us lots over the Christmas holidays with 2 big fires. Are these mandated? Is that how that works with the BC Fire Commissioner? So we have to do that.
The level of service that a municipality provides is at the discretion of the municipality. So technically, a municipality does not need to provide fire protective services, although your insurance rates would go through the roof because there's no fire protective services. So there's a caveat in there. So in order to, I'd say at this point, the reason that we're proposing and have proposed last year a deputy position is because of the volume of inspections and requirements that are needed to ensure that we're monitoring, providing the training, doing all the work necessary for the department. So as we transition from a volunteer department and 2008, early 2000s into 2010, there was a move on the fire commissioner's office to transition from volunteer departments to certified departments, and if you didn't meet those certifications, your insurance rate went up. Hence, back prior to Chief Getty's arrival, I'm assuming there was a good discussion amongst council about moving to a permanent full-time fire chief position that would be responsible for fire inspections, the training of their officers. That training requirements has gone up significantly, and it eats up a lot of time. On top of that, we look at our protective services, so emergency management, emergency social services, the fire inspections, the ongoing requirements of fire inspections for our industries that we have, so the fish plants, schools, and all the other buildings that we have. So to layer this on to one person, because there is no other support for the fire chief to undertake those services, means that we can't meet those demands. So undertaking the work needed for all the short-term rentals, every single one needs an inspection. That eats up time. Every time that we have a fire call, and the reporting and everything that goes along with that makes it more and more challenging to meet those basic level of service that we do for a fire department, which reflect on in proportionality to our insurance rates. Because if we don't meet those training objectives, I believe it's a level 2 that we're at right now, Chief. Yeah, so we have to do training that meets those requirements, that keeps our fire insurance rates where they're at. If we were dropped down to a 1, our fire rates go up. So all of that is intertwined into that position. So the reason that position was proposed last year, or in 2021, I believe, was to provide that level of service so that we can meet our obligations within the fire services, inspections, and training obligations, because a part of this also is the nature of volunteerism. The requirements for volunteers to undertake the training necessarily has risen as well. So asking that of a volunteer that is working full time to try to pay the bills, it's a lot. And for a lot of small municipalities, impossible to meet. So that just falls back onto our fire department, which is Chief Getty's. So therefore, another position allows us to have full coverage, make sure that we're doing the inspections, be proactive in our look at our industries, which I'm not sure when the last time we were able to get in there, but it's been a bit. So they're a high priority item that we need need to address moving forward. So I hope that answers some of the questions there.
It does. Like, there's, I guess it'd be nice to have a statistic on insurance. My wife takes care of that bill for our house. So I'm not sure if that's gone up or down. But it'd be interesting to know how much we save in insurance by doing that. But yeah, just in my mind, it's just if we have the town swells to the size that it does during the tourist season, and there might be an increase in emergency services or fire or something like that during that time. It almost might, seems like we should be amenable to using like a tourist influx or a resort municipality dollar for that. But I don't think we do. I don't think fire can be poached out of those funds at all.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Just so the money that we get by being a resort municipality, we can never put that towards something like fire. That's a municipal.
No, unfortunately not. So the Resort Municipality Initiative funds, the MRDT funds, those are pre-designated for specific things, right? And all tourism based. RMI has finally changed their tune a little bit and is allowing municipalities to allocate some of those funds to actually maintain some of the capital projects that we were limited to previously. So before, RMI would only pay for construction of the spring trail, but it would never pay for maintenance of that trail. Now they're shifting their tune and realizing that you can build lots of infrastructure, but if a community can't afford to maintain it, it becomes problematic. So with respect to the RMI MRDT, we can't reallocate that to other things. It's very similar to the gas tax. I know there's a new name for it, but Ms. Mudd, Building Communities Fund, that is dedicated for specific purposes like active transportation, sidewalks, and it can't be used for other services. So this is where our Director of Finance works magic in shuffling those, trying to free up unrestricted funds so that we can pay for things like fire services, bylaw enforcement, and all the regular operations, staff, administration, the cost of doing the finances, et cetera, et cetera. So those are all those unrestricted, which is basically the property taxes.
Cool, thank you.
Any other questions from council?
Maybe it's a comment. So this is one of those places where an alternative funding source would be handy.
As Councillor Hoare said, well, you said it, not me. Yes, wherever we can find opportunities to create alternate funding sources, and I'll bring it up because I can't help it. A parking program that Tofino implemented that generates dollars specifically from parking, right? So that comes from visitors to the community, they pay into it, and the municipality can then use that for whatever service they want. So those types of funds could go to offset the direct cost of bylaw enforcement. So that would be an avenue that you could take to generate revenue without burdening the permanent residents. But you could generate it from alternate sources. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about alternate sources of revenue, yes.
So when would be the time to have that discussion?
3 years ago.
Would it be a report to council from staff?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Am I to take that as a directive from council to bring a report forward? If council wants to direct staff to bring a report back on alternate revenue sources, I would be happy to receive that.
I move that.
Moved, seconded. Further discussion? All in favor? None opposed? Carried. Make it so. Okay. Seeing none, are you done your presentation, Ms. Monteith?
Through the mayor, I just have one more slide, which is the next steps for the budget. So on Monday, we start our official public engagement period with our email up there, and our in-person open house is March the 7th. We'll advertise the time as soon as I know what time it is. April 13th will be our next special budget meeting. We will review the revised BC assessment tax roll, and council officially receives all the written feedback that may have come our way as a package. And we would also have feedback forms at the open house as well. So we would include those in our feedback package as part of the agenda. And then we would have a discussion about that on that day. Council would then direct me to go prepare the financial bylaws, the tax rates bylaws, and the 5-year financial plan bylaw, either as is or with amendments, whatever you come up with that day. And then we'll adopt them on May the 9th. And that's it.
Great, thank you. Any further comments? We will adjourn this meeting at 3:03.
Thank you for a very clear report and presentation, and for all the